What is your argument that China can rise peacefully? What's your counterclaim to John's that it cannot?
Well, the reason why I don't think China is an emergent hegemon, an emergent version of the United States or the British Empire, is because of the political economy of China. China, we don't know how it's going to turn out. It's still a work in progress. So, it may turn out that John is absolutely right and I'm absolutely wrong. But the way I understand it is they have a remarkable planning mechanism. They plan their markets. The markets are boisterous and competitive, and they work really very well because they are so heavily planned. This is something that the Western mind cannot understand because they cannot fathom. Because in the West, we've been convinced that it's either the market or the state, or either you have planning or you have free enterprise. No, the only way of having a serious market is if you plan for it. If you plan for its the investment flows and so on. So they're doing it. They had a real estate bubble. They oversaw a very gradual, very clinical deflating of that bubble without, the subprime mortgage disaster of the United States. So they, in 2008, 2009, one of the reasons why financial capitalism survived was because of the very, very careful operations, macroeconomic operations of the Chinese, something that in the West we're not good at. So they have a capacity to manage their economy, their demand, their aggregate demand, their investment flows, without having to export deflation to grab markets using military means, like the Dutch were doing, or the British were doing, or the United States were doing at some point. So I think that the reason why I see things differently, and I do believe that it is possible. I can see it. Look at them now; they are the adults in the room. They respect all the contracts they have ever made. They really don't care about who is in government in any country. I saw this personally. When I was dealing with the Chinese government, they didn't give a damn whether we were on the left, on the right, who we were. They were not particularly hegemonic. I put to them 3 or 4 major changes in the contract that we had. They said, okay, fine. They were cool about it in ways that Western decision makers really are not. So I am optimistic about that. I'm not at all optimistic about the clash between the two lumps, as I call them, mountains of cloud capital, because there you have very serious power games that are being played both in China and in the United States.
I would just point out, Yanis, that you also want to focus not just on the economic dimension, but the strategic dimension as well. You want to think about how China behaves in its neighborhood with regard to Taiwan, with regard to the East China Sea, with regard to the South China Sea, how China's neighbors think about it as a possible strategic threat. And I think when you look at the strategic side of the equation, you see a lot of evidence that I'm correct. But of course, I have a vested interest in saying that. But I would just say to you, you don't only want to focus on the economic dimension, which is immensely important, of course, as we both agree. But I just want to go to what you call the cloud capital dimension. I like that term. I argued that around 2017, China had become wealthy enough that it was able to generate enough military might to qualify as a great power. So again, you see my emphasis on the economic foundation of military power. And if you look at GDP and other indicators of wealth, China was not as powerful as the United States in terms of economic might in 2017, but it was not that far away. It had become a truly impressive country economically. Now, at the heart of that wealth generation was its ability to develop sophisticated technologies. This is what you call cloud capital. And if you look at the competition, the economic competition between the United States and China today, it revolves around sophisticated technologies, or what you call cloud capital. There is absolutely no question about that. I do not disagree with you. And when I talk to audiences these days, and I talk about the security competition between the United States and China, I always go to great lengths to say, don't simply equate the security competition with the military competition. which you might do because you're talking to John, who's a realist. You want to understand that that security competition has an economic dimension as well. And it involves what you call cloud capital, or those sophisticated technologies. And I think many people in the American national security establishment worry more about the competition in terms of cloud capital or sophisticated technologies than they do the military competition, because I think they understand what you argued, which is that the Chinese may be able to beat us. The Chinese, as you know, as well as I do, are truly impressive when it comes to cloud capital, and they may be able to beat us. And if that's the case, you have to think about what the effects are on the global balance of power from a realist point of view. So what I'm saying here is that economic considerations matter enormously for realist considerations. And given what's going on with regard to cloud capital, the balance of power in the world could shift against the United States.
I don't think that the Chinese have any interest in projecting their fleet to the coast of the United States, to the Western Hemisphere, as you call it, in America, beyond the states of Malacca or in the Gulf. And this may change. I don't see it changing because their business model is really very different to that of the Dutch Empire, of the British Empire, and the Chinese Empire.